welcome to the first devlog. My name's Jake and my background is in 2D concepts and 3D art. So I decided a while ago that I've done a lot of work for other people making their games and I wanted to try my hand at it. I wanted to extend my skill set in the UE4 blueprinting system. I have experience in UE4 from a content creation perspective, but programming and gameplay are big unknowns to me. So instead of doing what I'm usually doing, which is to throw myself at the books or the internet, I would make these devlogs to maybe help others along the way. So I don't think I'm a particularly fast or graceful learner, so if I can do it, anyone can do it. Don't expect too high quality in terms of pretty much anything. I'll do my best to make high quality videos and content, but I have no idea what I'm doing. Before we start, there is a profanity warning on this video, or really the entire channel. I'll try to keep it to a minimum, but if you are delicate about that, cover your ears because we're about to Okay, so on screen at the moment, you can see the diorama that I came up with. It's a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of a style test. There's not a lot to it. So if we dive in here, we can see that there isn't a lot to this. It's mostly smoke and mirror. Floating plants, floating trees, stumps that are made into trunks, holes to the great unknown, that kind of thing. But since my background is in art, I'm not a bunch of cubes jumping on other cubes kind of guy. So this is what we'll be using as our jumping off point for beginning the game. I've not really done this before, so let's see how this goes. I'm sure it won't be a cluster. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to make our first level. What I am thinking is it's just going to be a forested path that leads to a town, a few enemies on it, nothing too crazy. Don't tell me that that's been in the shot the whole time. The reason for choosing this is that there are minimal unique assets and they will be able to be reused tons over the development of the project. It will also provide me with a little area to do things like test out player movement and enemy design way down the road. So let's start off with a quick concept to use for our scene. While this plays in the background, I'll give a bit of an explanation for why I'm doing concept art for such a simple idea and why it is usually a good idea for anyone to do it. Firstly, because I can, and I needed something to take up time in this video. But there are a few other reasons. It helps to quickly get your ideas out. Your brain is very bad at imagining full scenes and images, so getting it down and out of your head is usually always going to be beneficial. It also, and this is probably the most important one, lets you evaluate development time and keep everything in scope. This right now is probably bordering on way too much. So you'll see that I hugely simplify what I was thinking the town should be, and it's basically now just a wall and a gate. After this, I'll start pulling out details that I want to explore further, using it to count the assets I need to develop, and from there I'll have a much better idea of how much this will cost to develop. And the cost here is time cost, not financially, since I'm doing it all myself. So even doing just a few scribbles or some top downs are great too. They just help you keep on track. I should have spent more time on reference and thumbnailing before this. I definitely rushed this piece too much and it shows in the final product. I got too excited and I wanted to jump straight in. So there's a few good examples of what I was talking about before. As you saw, the ooze was originally green, so I changed that to orange because I found that it popped a lot more in the environment. Will this be the case in the actual level? Maybe, maybe not. Nothing is set in stone and the level will definitely evolve, but it's just food for thought. Mood is something that's also very important, and I don't think I did a good job of capturing it here. I actually think this is the hardest part of game development. Getting that mood on point takes forever. I still try to keep a little bit of storytelling in there, showing the walls of the town in the background. You'll see that I try at one point to design the ooze. I'm not actually happy with this design at all, but this also isn't the place for it. I'll be doing a call out for this a little bit later. I'm not even sure that the ooze will make it into the final blockout level. It's probably a bit much, since I don't have any idea how to animate or rig or... I'm so screwed. I'm also an environment artist by trade, so I'm very bad at characters. In later episodes, I guess I'll have to do the main character, but for now, this stick twat will have to work. Here's the finished piece. Not 100% happy with it, but for a quick painting it's okay. Like I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of things that I could have fixed if I would have spent the time doing thumbnailing and finding additional reference, but here we are. So around here's where I was thinking the first arena would be. So we'll use this area to sort of test mechanics and have it a bit more open as you step through. So it's probably like this area. It's hard to see from this angle, which doesn't really matter for this piece. But the good thing about using a path like this is that there's a lot of opportunities for this vegetation on the side here to sort of push the player down the path as the natural way to traverse through the level. Using light to lead the player is also another good little trick here, which I've tried to do with the light bleeding through the trees. All of this serves to move the player through the scene. A path also gives a good opportunity for interesting combat encounters as well. Down here is a good example of what concept art helps with when it comes to scoping out a scene. This transition here between the grass through to the path with a bit of dirt in between to just make it blend a bit better means that we already need 3 to 4 materials on our landscape material, which is something that each of those additional materials has some overhead involved with it. I will call out each of those different materials into more detail as we go through, just to get a better idea of what it is that each of those materials is made of. The foliage that we do have already for the diorama is not varied enough to handle things like this. Or we will definitely need to create a couple more different types of grasses, a few different types of plants, and that'll help us blend all these different pieces together. A couple of other items that stick out to me are the rocks, so tree roots, rock clusters. So in an environment like this, there are quite a few assets and they will take some time to develop. However, they, as I mentioned previously, they are great for reuse across different areas. Once you have all the assets that are contained in this scene, you'll be able to basically build out an entire forest. So this guy here, he can right off. I'm sending you to the Shadow Realm, also known as the Backlog. We aren't going to have the bandwidth to be able to develop all of the environment assets that we need for this level, as well as adding on an enemy as well. So we can develop that a bit later. Again, this is more of a mood piece. If I was actually making a full level design, I would include a top-down with some mechanics, a few ambush points, puzzles, etc. Whatever's really required to make the area interesting. But this is really just for testing, and I don't want this part to go on forever, so we are scoping down quite a lot. Okay, so it's now the next day, so here we are back in Unreal. So we'll just get started doing the new level block out. Okay, so I think that's it for today. As you can see, we sort of have a very basic block out now in terms of the flow of the little path that we have. I think at this point, the next thing that I'll do is probably go research how to create a decent initial landscape material. So we can start applying that to the landscape to help define some more of the areas and to get some more shape into the landscape. I haven't created a very robust landscape material before, so I think the next stage will probably be to do a bunch of research and a few tutorials, and that will probably be tomorrow's job. So it's now 6 AM, I'm going to go get ready for work, and we will continue working on this later. After a bunch of research, I decided that for the basic implementation of the landscape material, I would have 4 layers: stone, dirt, grass, and a path layer. I can extend this in the future, but I wanted to be mindful of the texture sample limit. This material is generating automatic material assignments of the 3 basic layers, stone, dirt, and grass, based on slope using a handy node called World Aligned Blend. After this is calculated, the landscape layers allow me to edit each of these materials by using the UE4 built-in landscape painting tool. This is what allows me to paint where my path goes, separate from any of the calculations done previously. Obviously, this doesn't do a fantastic job, but as a base, I think this is a really good starting point. I decided to wrap up each of my materials into a material function. Not because they are so complex now, but I picture when I have 16 materials inside of this landscape, it will get really messy. This will let me use these materials for other static meshes and have them all update when I update the function. If I redid this, I realized that I just made the same material 3 times over, and I probably would have changed my approach to making a material function for each of the meta class of materials. I could have gotten away with just one material function and changed the parameters in the landscape master. Ideally, I would like to have 2 to 3 types of each material in this landscape. However, I would only be able to use a maximum of roughly 5 layers on each component due to the SM3 texture sample limit. So there would have to be some trickery involved to better manage my textures in order for that to happen. Okay, it's now Sunday and I'm editing this video and it's already creeping up to the 20-minute mark. So I think I'll split this video into 2 sections. Part 1 will be what we've already done, and part 2 will be creating the actual assets. We have a rough direction down and a basic landscape material. Now I am well aware that this is not how most people start a game. Most people start with mechanics, gameplay, game designy thing. Fuck, I'm awkward. Not some strange level that really only has models in it and a few materials. I didn't want to start these vlogs when I had the game in a basic state. I think that won't be as useful for people who, like me, work full time and only want to do game dev as a hobby. In the next one, we'll go into creating some of the substance designer materials and some of the individual assets that we need for the scene. If you think this journey is something that would interest you, throw me a like, subscribe, and what was the other one? What bell? Just do the thing.